Good morning, Shaw University students. Thank you so much for taking this opportunity to meet with Red Hat. We have some very talented people from Red Hat who are going to share with us the opportunities of the virtual resume workshop. So we would like to welcome Larissa Herbert and Laura Cerratos, who are with the talent acquisition specialists for early talent, and they're going to take some valuable time to show us the Red Hat process to have our resume um, going properly. And so on behalf of Dr. Lynette Wood, my dean, we look forward to you having a good time and enjoying this and keeping this going in the future. So we'll let them begin at this time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I am Larissa Herbert. I am an acquisition specialist with our early talent team at Red Hat. I've been at Red Hat for 3 years, and I'm joined by Laura Serratos. I'll let her introduce herself as well.
Hey everybody, I'm Laura. Same team as Larissa at Red Hat in the early talent space. I've been with Red Hat just a little bit over a year. So looking forward to chatting with you all tonight via this platform.
Go to the next slide, please. Great. So tonight we are going to discuss the importance of a strong resume, the key components of a resume. Once you have all that, where to start, resume do's and don'ts, tailoring your resume to meet your goals, and then next steps, once you have all this information, what and how can we move forward with it. Next slide, please. So first question, what is a resume? A resume is a document created by you to showcase your background, skills, and accomplishments. Resumes are most often used for pursuing a new career opportunity, but can also be used for applying to scholarships and other professional programs. You may have had jobs in the past where you filled in an application and didn't need to submit a resume, but for internships and most professional opportunities you pursue, you'll need this document, and here's why. Next slide. This is your in. A resume is your chance to show the person reviewing it that you're a capable, qualified, and interesting candidate. Of course, a company can't tell if you're a fit without an interview, but you can't even get an interview unless your resume makes you look like a fit. Your resume will represent you before you get a chance to represent yourself. Next slide. So what can a strong resume do for you? Your resume will open the door for you to let yourself in. A strong resume should highlight your skills and show that you'll be an asset in the role you're applying for. A strong resume will pique the interest of the person that reviews it, enough for them to want to speak more with you about your experience. And a strong resume will help you land opportunities that will launch your future. Next slide.
All right, so now that you know kind of what a resume is, let's go ahead and jump into what the key components are. I also want to call out, if you have questions tonight, feel free to drop that at any point in time. We'll save some time for Q&A at the end, but of course, if they come out throughout, just drop them in the chat and we'll get to them a little bit later. So the key components of a resume, at a high level, there's 4 key components. We've got education. This is really important, especially if you're applying for an internship or new grad role. Make sure that you have your school and your anticipated grad date in plain view. As recruiters, we're always looking for the grad date to make sure you're even eligible for the position, so always make sure that that's front and center. For experience, we're going to go into this a little bit more later, but essentially your formal work experience, which is going to be your jobs, your internships, and other relevant experience such as projects, extracurriculars, make sure that that's clear and called out on your resume. Relevant skills and coursework, that kind of goes similar into experience, but this is where you're going to have all of your kind of skills that you've worked on. If you're applying for a tech role, this might be good to put technologies, that kind of thing. It's still important for non-tech roles to put those soft and hard skills in there, but it really can be a quick grab and go for recruiters when they're looking at your resume, so that's really an important section. Finally, the extracurriculars and leadership. This section is really going to be what sets you apart. A lot of times, the factors with you and other candidates are very similar. So how can you stand out? And this section is really one way that you can do that. Next slide. Some additional must-haves. This might seem kind of straightforward, but make sure you have your name and contact information on your resume. As recruiters, this is where we're grabbing your information to reach out to you about the jobs. So make sure this is correct. We're probably not going to spend a lot of time reaching out to you multiple times if it's not correct. So always triple check to make sure that that info is there. Objective statement, also known as a summary statement. This is really going to tell the reader of your resume what type of opportunity you're looking for. This is a really great section also to just kind of give a quick intro to yourself and make sure that this lines up with the position that you're applying for. A lot of times we'll see objective statements and summaries for different positions, and that's not a good look. So just make sure that it's relevant for the one that you're looking for. Projects. This is also great if you don't have kind of that quote formal work experience, which comes with the jobs or internships. You can also use the project section to really highlight those skills that you've gotten through your classes too. All right, next slide.
So your resume is really your chance to show off, but there are some general rules to follow when doing so. Number one, show yourself as a dynamic person. You are more than a student. Do you work? Do you volunteer? Are you part of a student organization? Do you play a sport? Are you a member of the band? Adding all of these things to your resume shows future employers that you are a dynamic person. You can juggle more than one thing at a time, and that you're investing in yourself by being involved. Next up, make your experiences sound impressive and responsible. So we just talked about all the things maybe doing that you'd want to add to your resume, but it's important to make sure that these experiences stand out from other students. So we'll talk more in just a few minutes about turning your experiences into impact statements. Highlight your most relevant skills and experience. This is how you make recruiters' jobs easier. We can review hundreds of resumes a day. The more visible you can make your skills and experience that we're looking for in your resume, the better. And we'll talk more about how to do this also. And then include information about the successes you've achieved. Don't sell yourself short. Consider your achievements in the classroom, your community, and the workplace. Next slide. Those were the do's. Here are the don'ts. This is not how you want your resume to stand out. My number one rule for resumes is do not lie. I know we've all heard the term fake it until you make it, but do not lie on your resume. Anything that you put on your resume is fair game for recruiters and managers to ask you about or to verify, and you do not want to get caught up. Don't copy and paste directly from a previous job description. So it can be tempting when you are working on your resume, you're talking about your experience at Chick-fil-A. So go to a Chick-fil-A job description and copy and paste all of the work that you did because that's in the job description. This really comes off as lazy, and a recruiter can spot it from a mile away. Really take the time to reflect on your personal job responsibilities and, again, bring it back to that impact statement, which we'll talk about soon. Don't plagiarize or use someone else's resume as your own. Believe it or not, we see this more than we'd like. Especially with students within the same majors and same classes that might be applying to different jobs. But as a recruiter, I could handle jobs. I could be hiring for 80 internships. So we all see the same resumes. We kind of remember them. They stick out. And it's really, like Laura said earlier, not a good look. And then lastly, don't add personal information to your resume, such as age, sex, date of birth, etc. Your resume is not the place for this information, and it can open you and your employer up for the chance of discrimination. Next slide.
Perfect. So now we've talked a little bit about the basics. So where do you go from here? Now that you have a resume, how do you even move forward? Next slide. So when you're thinking about, how to really even start your resume, what to add to it, you may have kind of the basics, like I said. It often really helps to think about, all of your stuff in a bigger picture. So what we really recommend is making a list. Think about the things that you want to include in this list. What kind of jobs have you worked in, responsibilities, achievements. Think about courses, skills, projects, leadership. Nothing is too small to put on there. So really, start with that list and go from there. Once you have the general ideas on your list, you can really start to build out kind of those fancier sentences that really lead to the impact statements within each area. Next slide. You want to make your experience work for you. So you are the one that has done all this hard work, and you want to take that and make yourself stand out when it comes to the recruitment and job application process. So we have these things called impact statements, and I'm sure you've heard this before, but impact statements are really meant to elevate your experience and show whoever's reading your resume why what you did is important and why, honestly, you should be selected for the job. You want to make sure that the person reading your resume understands what the impact that you did was, and so we don't have to guess, and there's no kind of gray space left. So really, you want to use like strong adjectives to describe how you did something. We'll a few examples in the next few slides, but you want to be clear, concise. It's always good to use number or dollar amounts, percentages, especially when you're talking about areas where you can kind of quantify that success. Always, and the final statement says, use phrases like resulting in, ensure, provide in order to round out your why. So always make sure you're telling the reader how you were successful, why you were successful, and then why you should be a good fit for this role. Next slide. All right, so let's take a look at some common work experience and how you can really fluff this up for your resume to turn those turn them into impact statements like we just talked about. So at first glance, it may seem easy to put basic information but with just a little bit of extra work, you can really make your experience work for you. So some common work experience we see as worked as a cashier. So, this is really straight and to the point, but it really doesn't convey all of the hard work that you're doing at this job, because working as a cashier is much more than just that simple statement. So how can we make this sound better to convey the work that you are doing? So see where we move to for the impact statement. Maintain high standards of customer service during high volume, fast-paced operations. Note that this statement really calls out a few things. The type of work that you're doing, it shows that you can handle competing priorities, you're flexible, you can handle a fast work environment, all in one sentence. Next slide. All right, so another example, handled inventory truck shipment. So this is a very common work experience that we see, especially in retail or service industry jobs. So how can we make this better? Assisted with weekly inventory counts, investigated inbound and outbound shipment variances. You might even have the opportunity to images or numbers or things like that to quantify this. So you'll see that really anything that you can do to just kind of, like I said, fluff this statement up enough so it really shows the impact, shows the why. Now keep in mind, like Larissa said, you don't want to go way too overboard. You don't want to add anything that's, false or just really kind of outrageous. But there's also a fine line between kind of basic and outrageous. So really make sure that your impact statements are working for you. Next slide.
Awesome. So now that you've made your list, you've crafted your impact statements, you know exactly what you want to say in your resume and how you want to say it. You just need to figure out how to lay it out in a way that's professional but eye-catching. Resume formatting can be a huge pain. It is painful, but that's what templates are for. Templates are your friend, I promise. You can use templates through Microsoft Office or whatever system or suite you're using. Everyone usually has those templates in there, but there's also a few sites that do have free templates as well. You can just Google free resume templates, but resumegenius.com, myperfectresume.com, and resumecompanion.com all have a really large number of free resume templates for you to use. Next slide. So here are some things to keep in mind when you are finally putting your resume to paper. Keep your resume to one page. I saw that question come up in the chat. As a student, there is no need for your resume to be longer than one page. If your resume is longer than one page, think about your formatting. Is there space for your margins to be pushed out? Do you have a lot of white space on your page that you can get rid of? Are you maybe including experience that's irrelevant at this point? Maybe you're including really early high school stuff, but you are a senior and you already have plenty of work experience to put on there. Think about ways that you can cut it down to one page. Clearly label your sections. Recruiters' eyes dart to pertinent information, so make it easiest to find what we're looking for, whether that's education, which Laura mentioned is probably one of the most important sections that we're looking for first. If you are applying to an internship role, experience, extracurriculars, skills, whatever, make sure you're labeling it clearly so your resume has a flow and we can find the information that we're looking for. Like I said before, make good use of the space on the paper. Just as your resume should only be one page, the page should look full. If you feel like you're lacking enough experience to fill out a whole page, that's really a time where you can get creative, maybe with some of these templates, to see what other formatting makes your page look fuller. Some flair is okay. I know that this is has been controversial in the past, but as a recruiter, I can tell you, if you're using a template that has, maybe a small graphic or a small pop of color, or some interesting way that it's laid out, it does really make us stop and catch our eye. As long as it's not unprofessional, if it's no, crazy fonts or, I also mentioned do not put your photo on your resume. Things like that kind of catch our eye in a bad way. And I say no photos on your resume because that's what your LinkedIn is for. And, maybe we can talk about that another day. That's a whole session in itself. But I would say don't shy away from kind of showing your personality on your resume as well, as long as it's still professional. And then finally, once you have your resume just the way you like it, make sure you save it as a PDF and that you're applying to roles using that PDF. And what saving it as a PDF is going to do is freeze the formatting exactly the way that you intended it to be, versus when you apply, maybe using a Word document that you saved as a Word document. When you apply to our system, sometimes something gets mixed up on its way to our side, and it looks much different than you intended it to look, and we have a hard time reading it, or it just isn't appealing, and it has a less chance of getting looked at and taken seriously. Next slide. Okay, so we are going to ask you to use the chat feature and do this section's a little bit interactive. If you see the chat feature right on the side of your screen, we have a couple of resume examples, and we would love for you all to call out what are some things that you see that might be good with these resumes, and what are some things that you think may not be so good with these resumes. So we'll give you a couple minutes, and we'll monitor the chat, and then we can talk through them. Or maybe like a minute.
Yeah, maybe like 50 seconds. I think there might be a zoom feature at the bottom. If you look at your screen, there should be a slide bar, and you should be able to kind of move in and out a little bit, I believe. Not sure how much bigger it will make that, but I think it will at least make us smaller if you have us on the screen.
All right, it's just a few more seconds. I see one comment in here.
Awesome. Getting some comments now.
All right, so I see a lot of comments about Joanna's resume that are not so great. So I see a call out for Joanna's font and lack of detail. So let's address the font first. Correct. Unprofessional. It's actually really hard to read. In addition to the font, her colors, the orange and green, are also really hard to read. So think about, are you using a professional font? Like I said, there's some room for showing your personality, but this would be way on the end of the spectrum where it's too far. It's unprofessional. Let's see what else.
We've got her email, kind of following along on the professional side of things. Yeah, listen, we see some crazy emails. So I always encourage students to use their student email because generally those are pretty safe. But just keep that, if you prefer to use your personal email, just keep that in mind. Make sure it's professional, make sure it's something you would want to be associated with.
We also see volunteering on Joanna's, I believe. So Joanna says, sometimes I donate stuff to the local thrift store, which is great. I think that's an opportunity for an impact statement, right? It could be something that she is passionate about. There is a way to change that statement to make it, this is a passion of mine. This is how I give back. This is a hobby of mine. I enjoy doing this. But really, if you downplay it that much, you might as well not even put it on there.
Absolutely.
Joanna, large blank areas throughout her resume. Absolutely. Look at hers compared to student A name right next to each other. How much they filled out their resume compared to Joanna's resume. What else?
And something I think might be good to point out, if you look at the two resumes, the experience themselves really aren't that different. You've got your customer service, you've got security guard, cashier, fast food. It's really relevant on both of the resumes. Just one person took it a little bit further to make those impact statements, and the other person didn't put in the efforts. And, a lot of times I think people get caught up in, I don't have relevant experience, or I don't think my experience is relevant, but you can still make impact statements and still, any work experience is relevant.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yep. I think a couple other people just called out lack of detail in Joanna. What are the skills that make her a good candidate for the job? Really explaining your experience. And something, Laura said before is to make your experience as clear for us as recruiters as possible. I think what you have to understand, especially on the technical side, right? My degree is in HR. I think Laura's is also maybe HR business. We're not technical people necessarily, right? So it's up to you to really explain why the experience that you listed is relevant. Why does this make you a good fit? Why does this make you a good candidate? What is the impact? That's why we call it an impact statement. What is the why, the how? Why is this important to us? So really, the more clear that you can explain things out to recruiters, act like they don't know what a cashier does, really explain why this is important.
Definitely.
So Sonia called out resume 1 as the listing of experiences, but not soft skills or information above the job duties. So I think that is a preference, right? You don't have to have all of these sections all of the time, but you should have them in a way that serves you. I think this student kind of talks more about their skills within their work experiences. And they do have, I'm trying to make it bigger on my side now. So they have the technologies and skills in there as well. But it's really all about what sections are going to meet your needs. For me, I think a skills section is a really great catch-all. I love to tell students to use a skills section when they're looking at a job description and they see skills on that description that they have, but didn't have on their resume before, and they don't want to make a lot of major changes to their resume. Throw it in that skills section. Let that be a list of skills that you have that you can change out for relevant positions. Anything else you want to call out, Laura?
No, I think that this is all good feedback. Also just to reiterate the fact, one resume is not it's not one resume fit all. So feel free to make your resume work for you. It also might be something that you change your resume around depending on the job that you're applying for. It's really up to you. It's your opportunity to make a piece of paper or electronic piece of paper that stands out and really, is yourself in the professional world on a piece of paper. So, don't feel like you have to use, a specific order or things like that. Just do what works for you.
I think we can go to the next slide.
Awesome. So now that you have your resume, obviously the next step is going to be applying to the jobs. So let's talk about how, you can make sure your resume is best positioned for the roles you want to apply for. Next slide. So your resume in a typical internship or grad role, or honestly full-time experience hire as well, you really have 3 hurdles that you have to jump through. The first of these hurdles is something that a lot of students don't think about, and this is the ATS. So the ATS is your applicant tracking system. At Red Hat, we use something called iCIMS. It's when you apply to the system through the link on the back end. The tracking system is where we, the recruiters and the hiring managers, go in, look at all their resumes, and it's kind of like the platform where the resumes sit. So in order to get through just the basic, ATS system, a lot of times you might see screening questions about, work authorization or location or things like that. Another thing that I also see you wouldn't think about that students get kind of stuck in this stage is not completing some of the forms or submitting their resume all the way. So just make sure when you apply, you're submitting your resume all the way, you get the confirmation email and your resume is in that format where it's going to go through. Larissa called this out earlier, but I think this is such a small thing that makes a huge impact. Really can't recommend enough to put your resume in a PDF form. That really makes sure that once the resume is in the system, it looks like you want it to look and it's not going to get all messed up.
Laura,
So the second hurdle is, yeah, absolutely.
Another thing, I don't think we really talk about cover letters in this presentation a lot. And for me, I'm not interested in cover letters. I would say only use a cover letter if the role specifically asks you for a cover letter. And the reason that I say that in dealing with the ATS is that a lot of times when you upload a cover letter, we see that instead of your resume. The way it is on the back end is we only see, one document that that fills up, that space that we look at. So if I'm seeing your cover letter and not your resume, it's next. I don't have time to search for your resume. We see so many resumes a day. So unless that role is specifically asking for it, you could be doing yourself a disservice where it looks like you only uploaded a cover letter and we can't find your resume and we don't have time to look for it.
Definitely. Yeah. I think that's a great call out. At Red Hat, we don't really use cover letters. Other companies might, but really pay attention to if they're asking for it. If they don't explicitly say upload a cover letter, I would recommend just do your resume. So the second hurdle that you're going to kind of get through is what we've kind of been focusing on tonight, but that's the recruiter. So on average, I would say, especially at a company like Red Hat, where we have a lot of internship positions, we get a lot of candidates, we're spending probably on average about 10 to 15 seconds looking at your resume. So it's really important to think about what can I convey to the recruiter in those 10 to 15 seconds that's going to get me to the next stage. Larissa mentioned that both her and I, and it's probably a lot of the case with recruiters, we aren't in the tech background. We both have HR business degrees. That's what we're used for. We're trained to look for these skills. So that's why it's so critical, tech or non-tech, to make sure that your resume is your best foot forward, and it's going to be something that in 10 to 15 seconds can convey what you need it to. The third hurdle is the hiring manager. So the hiring manager is ultimately the one that's going to be making the decision about whether or not they want to hire you. The goal of the resume is to get to an interview stage and then to get to an offer. But in order to get there, you have to go through these hurdles before that. So just keep in mind that by the time the hiring manager gets your resume, it's already gone through the tracking system and the recruiter. So just make sure that you can get through those steps. So then you have the opportunity to present yourself in an interview, and then you have a lot more opportunity to maybe talk about things that aren't necessarily conveyed over paper. Next slide, please. So these are just kind of some quick numbers for you. On average, internships will likely receive around 250 plus applicants, especially tech focused or at larger companies at Red Hat. I've seen this in other companies where I've worked. The number of applicants that we get for internship positions is usually a lot. So some things that we might use on the back end are things like, keyword search. So that's like a tool that's going to allow us to find applicants that stand out. So that's why it's so important to have those like skills and impact statements, because we might be using a keyword search on the back end. Just remember that we're moving quickly, so we want to make sure that your resume gets in front of us during that initial review period, because if it doesn't even make it to the recruiter, then it's definitely not going to make it to the manager. And you're going to see here that on average, the managers only see about 30 applicants, and these usually are the top of the top candidates from each role. From when the hiring manager sees the resume, they're going to usually decide to interview around 5 candidates. Keep in mind that you don't normally have a chance to prove yourself in an interview until, like I said earlier, both the recruiter and the manager have reviewed, which is why having a good resume is so important. I want to also quickly call out that schools, that we partner with and events like this always give an advantage because we have a visibility into candidates. So by coming to stuff like that, marketing yourself with Red Hat and other companies, you're already one step ahead, because these partnerships really give us an opportunity to get that one-on-one time, or kind of that first layer of view to the resumes. And then, the managers have the resumes a little bit earlier and things like that. So, long story short, if you don't take anything else away from this, your resume is where it is at. Your resume is what is going to get you to interview stage, and the interview stage is what's going to get you the offer. Next slide.
All right, so here is a copy of one of our job descriptions for a software engineering internship. So Laura and I have both kind of alluded to making sure your experience kind of reflects what the role is looking for. And making yourself visible for the specific role that you're looking for, or tailoring your resume. So when you're applying for a role, it's important to understand how recruiters work through finding resumes to help make sure yours is seen. We work on a lot of different positions, like we've said before, and all we really have to go off of is the job description and the information the manager gives us about the candidate profile that they're looking for, to help us start filtering out resumes and finding the potential fit. So Laura talked about this before, keywords. The keywords usually come from the required skills section that you see that's kind of toward the bottom of the job description. The required skills are typically the must-haves for the position. So in my mind as a recruiter, if you don't have at least some of these skills listed under required skills on your resume, there isn't a need for me to view your resume, especially if I'm trying to save time to look at the best of the best. So let's take a look at the required skills here. The first line, familiarity with and desire to learn more about cloud infrastructure and its management, proficiency in a modern program language like Python, Go, Java, etc. So as a recruiter, this is the job I'm working on. I'm going to my search bar. I'm doing a Boolean search for resumes that have Python or Go or Java because the manager said he needs somebody that's proficient in these. The second line, proficiency with source control, Git. Okay, so I'm adding Git as well to this search. That's going to narrow it down quite a bit for me and give me a more manageable number of resumes to look through manually. So now that I'm looking through manually, I'm going back and looking at some of the other things the job description is asking for with my own eyes. So for instance, currently pursuing a degree in engineering, computer science, or related field. Or, are you still in school? Have you graduated no longer than 6 months ago, like the description says? Now that I have this smaller number of candidates, I'm going through and verifying that as a next step. Then we start to look more at the job responsibilities and see how you match up as a candidate. When we post a job, we're not looking for you to have all of the experience that it's saying you will be doing. We understand that this is what an internship is for. It's for you to learn how to do these things. What I'm looking for is, do you have the potential to do these things that are listed in the primary job responsibilities? So for instance, the first line, design, develop, troubleshoot, and debug software program for enhancement to new products. Like Laura said, we are not tech people. The way that I'm reading this and interpreting this is they're looking for a candidate that can think creatively, design and develop, and solve problems, troubleshoot and debug. Thinking creatively and problem solving can show up so many ways in your experience. So make sure that you're able to convey that. Like I said, you don't have to have this specific experience, but do you have the experience that's on theme for what they're looking for? The same goes for the job summary at the top of the job description. Can you pick out the major themes that they are looking for? It says, in this role, you will work as part of a team. Do you talk about your experience working with teams on your resume? It says this team is geographically distributed. That means they could be located all over the country or the world. Do you have any experience working with team members that do not sit in the same area as you and you had to work with them virtually? Put that on your resume. It also says your contributions to projects and collaborations with the team to address the challenges that emerge as we evolve with OpenShift's industry, leading solutions will make you an essential member of this team. So again, I'm hearing the team themes, contributions, collaborations, all of these things are really very important to this role. So if you can convey that you have the ability to work in that manner, you're a potential fit for this position in the eyes of a recruiter. Next slide, please. So really, the art of resume review is a matching game. We're looking for a resume that matches up with the skills and the candidate profile that the manager is asking for. That's how, we get our gold star and, our high ratings as recruiters is, did you give me what I asked you for? So really, we're looking for that match. So that's why it's important to tailor your resume to the role you're applying for when you can to increase your chances of being seen by the manager. So when you're looking at your resume and the role you're applying for and deciding whether or not you can do these adjustments, consider the following. Like I just said, pay attention to the required skills section of the job description. Are there skills listed there that you have but are not reflected on your resume? If so, add them. Also, I'm talking about required skills, but don't shy away from roles where you don't have all the required skills. I'm looking for some. It's just part of the profile. So yes, it does help us narrow down our search, but don't automatically rule yourself out. There is a very large group of people that do not rule themselves out and, still can find a way to get in the door. Don't sell yourself short on that piece. Think about what soft skills this role requires. This is where really taking that critical role or critical look at the job description comes in handy. Can you kind of decipher what they're saying and get to the meat of what they are really asking for from a soft skills standpoint? To sum up the first 2 points, if you have experience that the job description is asking for, make sure your resume reflects that and you're using keywords to help us find that. And lastly, update your objective statement if need be. So many students, make their objective statement specific to a certain role, which is fine, but then they forget to switch it for the next role. So if you are an accounting student and you are saying, I'm looking for an accounting role, and then you apply to my legal internship role, I am not looking at your resume anymore. It's a lack of, attention to detail because you didn't change it. And to me, it's saying this is not really the role that you want. You're just applying to anything. Next slide.
All right. So just a final recap. We've talked about a lot of information tonight, but four kind of keep in mind. Plan it out. Start with your list of accomplishments that we talked about earlier. Always add to that list. It should really be ongoing as you get more experience, projects, skills, etc. Always highlight that experience. Paint your experience in a way that shows your value and impact. We can't talk enough about impact statements and how to make your experience work for you. And like Larissa said, don't sell yourself short. Put that stuff on your resume, and then, if you don't have everything that the job description calls for, apply anyways.
Then also, like we just said, tailor your resume to the job you're applying for whenever you can. It will only help you get seen by the recruiter and then hopefully the manager. It can't hurt to tailor your resume whenever you can. And then lastly, review. Have others give you feedback and proofread your resume. A typo on a resume is like your fatal flaw. Do not submit a resume with typos whenever you can. You can have your professors review it. You can have mentors or other professionals review it. You can have your friends review it. The more eyes you can get on it, the less of a chance you have of leaving a mistake on there that you missed. And then for the next slide, we can talk a little bit more about how we can help you review your resume as a next step. So tomorrow, we're going to send out a copy of this presentation, but we'll also send out a link for you to submit your resume if you'd like to have it reviewed by a Red Hat recruiter. Our ask, though, is that you take the information that you learned in this presentation and make some edits to your resume before you send it to us. Help us, we'll review kind of your next draft of your resume once you apply these skills if you haven't done so already. So again, we'll send out an email with the link. You can send it over, a recruiter will review it, and we'll give you some detailed feedback and answer any one-on-one questions you might have about your personal resume. But that is all that we have. For our next slide, we are just going to open it up for questions, and hopefully we can help.
Larissa, there are 3 questions in the Q&A. The first 2 you already hinted or responded to, but how many pages maximum should a resume be? I believe you mentioned that college or university age students, your resume should not exceed 1 page, correct?
Correct.
And then can we show a picture on our resume? And I think we discussed that the best place for your picture is your LinkedIn profile. Do you want to elaborate any more on that, Larissa or Laura?
Yeah, I can take this one. Yeah, well, I will take it from a couple different angles. First of all, the short answer is no. Don't put a picture on there. Save that for your LinkedIn profile. But honestly, it could be used. You could really be setting yourself up. It's kind of like talking about personal information on your resume. It's kind of like putting those like personal details. You could be setting yourself up or the company up for, discrimination as well. The point of a resume is so that you have your all of your skills on a paper, and the manager and the recruiter can take a fair assessment. If you put your resume on there, it's just not a good thing either way. So put that on your LinkedIn. You could always put a link to your LinkedIn in your resume. That's always a good option too, but keep the photo off.
Thanks, Laura. The next question, if the student is a freshman and they don't have experience, what can they add in the experience section of their resume instead?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that is where you have an opportunity to, one, I would say as you're a freshman now, think about what you are wanting to accomplish and the type of things you'd like to put on your resume and start making those things happen for yourself this year, right? Get involved. So you have some things that you can add to your resume that will reflect as college experience, student organizations. You can run for an office of a student organization, really be engaged in your group projects so you can talk about project work and how you work well on teams and things like that. So I think project work, student organizations, volunteer experience, things that show leadership, especially in your freshman year, is a really strong look for your resume. And then also I think if you have work experience from, maybe 1 to 2 years ago, so maybe like your last 2 years of high school, just to show, I was in high school, I was accomplishing this, but I also had this job. As long as you make those work experience show, the impact, do those impact statements with them, it's okay to put that on there until you start building up that experience in college.
Yep, that's really helpful. Thanks, Larissa. The next question is, can you make a general objective statement or should you make one unique for the job you are applying for?
Yeah, I can take this one. And, Larissa, I think it's kind of up to you. It might be easier to have a general objective statement if you're applying to all of the kind of same type of roles. But, a lot of times if you're like a business major or something that's not necessarily like specified, you might be applying to all kinds of different roles. You might be applying to like finance, marketing, HR. So if you do decide to make a unique one, like we touched on earlier, just make sure that it's tailored to the job. Make sure it's the right job that you're applying for, and just make sure it lines up. So it's kind of a personal preference, but if you do change it, make sure that it's the right one for the right position.
That's helpful. And I know you mentioned that sometime tomorrow we'll be sending out a link for everyone to submit resumes. So that was just the last question that we got. Where do we upload our resumes? So Stacy answered, but I'll just reiterate it again. We'll send out a link for everyone to submit your resume along with this presentation and the recording from today. So hopefully you'll be able to take what you learned throughout this session and apply it as you're creating or updating your resume. And then you'll be able to submit it to our talent acquisition team via the link and receive some good direct feedback to make edits to your resume. Did I miss anything with that?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Awesome. There are no other questions right now, Larissa and Laura.
Okay.
Perfect.
Well, I would say if you all are on LinkedIn, feel free to add us. I'm, Larissa Herbert and Laura Serratos on LinkedIn. And then please submit your resume. My ask will be though that you kind of take some stuff that you learned today and do a first pass on your resume before you send it to us. That way we can really help refine, the best version of your resume so far to help you perfect it.
Yeah, same here. Feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. Send us your resumes. It's been great talking to all of y'all. I appreciate all the questions and comments. And, if Larissa and I can be of any help while we're reviewing the resumes, just let us know. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
On behalf of Shaw University, we are so thankful for your event and so thankful for the time you took to enrich our students. And if we could do a big clap, we would really do a big clap and applause. I don't know how to hit that button yet, but we are so thankful for your support, and we look forward to more events like this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Anytime. All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Night.